Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I've had the pleasure of doing a little bit of traveling this summer. Three different trips to three different locations in the world, three different countries, and all of them were for speaking engagements that had to do with traditional Catholicism. I spoke at the G.K. Chesterton 150th birthday celebration in London, England at the end of May, early June, which was a wonderful thing. Spent a few days in London. I went to Post Falls, Idaho, very different than London, England, and spent some time there at a event talking about traditional Catholicism and so forth to a bunch of different trads, and spent a few days there as well. And I just, about 3-4 weeks ago, I was in Ireland speaking at the SSPX conference there talking about traditional Catholicism. And I was able to go on a trip to Knock, a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Knock, which was wonderful. And actually, just recently, nothing to do with work, just last weekend, my family, I took my wife and children to Montreal, Quebec, in the heart of what used to be one of the most Catholic jurisdictions on earth. And we had the pleasure of going on a pilgrimage led by our Bishop Fillet of the Society of St. Pius X, and it was to renew the consecration of Canada to St. Joseph. It was the 400th anniversary of that fateful event so many centuries ago by the Bishop of Quebec, which at the time was essentially the Bishop of all of Canada. It was the only jurisdiction. And it was to renew the consecration of our beautiful country to glorious St. Joseph. And in these different regions in the world, of course, these are events that I'm speaking at, or in the case of Montreal, it's an SSPX thing. So people know who I am, and I don't say that to puff myself up or anything like that, but people know who I am, and they talk to me and so forth. And I get all these concerns from people all over the world, and it's always the same concerns. Have you heard the recent thing Pope Francis said? What's going to happen with this? The globalists are after us. All these things are very real. All these things are very real. They're all very real dangers. They're all very real tragedies, difficulties that everyone has to face. And in my opinion, these concerns are essentially universal amongst faithful Catholics. From my experience, that's what I've gathered. And of course, I have many interactions with Catholics online, many emails. I do my inbox in my emails, and there's 100 unread, and we get it done, and then a week later there's another 100 unread, and whatever, and it's just too much for me to deal with sometimes. But I do my best to respond to people and so forth. And I get a lot of comments from people all over the world, from Asia and Africa and Europe and South America, everywhere, talking about, the difficulties that they're facing as traditional Catholics, and what are they going to do? And, I don't have the Latin Mass near me. Should I go to this or that? And lots of these questions. I'm very honored that everybody asks me these questions, and it's given me some perspective on the difficulties facing faithful Catholics around the world. So I was asking my wife earlier, because to be honest, it's hard to do these YouTube shows. It's not always easy to find something worth talking about. Personally, I don't enjoy talking about the crisis in the church all that much. I like talking about the doctrinal aspects. I think it's important to discuss, sort of the nitty gritty, the real source of the problems, modernism and liberalism and the Mass and so forth. That's stuff I enjoy, the history of it. I think that's intellectually and, in a sense, spiritually satisfying, because it's edifying and it confirms you in your faith and so forth. But the politics and the news, Pope Francis did this, Pope Francis did that. Pope Francis has recently just doubled down on his insanity about different religions. I think he even said, the different religions are inspired by God and they have divine inspiration in them. And these things are heresies. These things are errors, at least. But they are heretical. They're wrong. They lead Catholics astray. You're seeing insane things happen with the various Catholic YouTubers, and I don't really watch any of them, by the way. The only shows I ever really check out are Taylor Marshall. Sometimes I'll watch some of his. He's a friend of mine, and I'll check in. Sometimes I listen to some Avoiding Babylon because I find it funny. But I really don't keep up on pretty much anybody's Catholic YouTube channel. To be honest, because I spend so much time reading and writing about this stuff and presenting about this stuff, I usually go to the media for different reasons. I'm listening to something about history, or I like to check in on my Buffalo Bills during the football season, things like that. But I don't really spend a lot of time. But I've kind of seen the reactions from different people across the specter and things like that about Pope Francis. And people are, the Orthodox Christians online are going crazy because this is their moment. Look, your Pope is a heretic and you have that heresy of papal infallibility. And look at this, haha, gotcha. We were right all along. And a lot of the Sedevacantists, who I respect many of them and hold friendships with some of them. This isn't a slight in general. But, hey, told you. Look, I got these arguments. This Pope is a heretic. So, hey, look at the one before that. They haven't been popes for a long time. And people are confused. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to live their lives. They don't know how to stay Catholic. And they're wondering, what is going on here? What should I do? I'm going to give you some advice. And I hope that it's good and you can take it or leave it. When I was in London, England, at the end of May, early June, I had the pleasure of listening to an old Irish priest, Father O'Reilly. Father O'Reilly, if you're listening, such a pleasure to see you a couple times this summer. I wish we could spend more time together. And he gave a sermon, and it was on the Sunday. I think it was Corpus Christi Sunday, because I was there for Corpus Christi on the Thursday, and I was still there on the Sunday, I believe. Corpus Christi Sunday. And we were in London, England, in this tiny little chapel at the Priory of the Society of St. Pius X there, the St. George's House. Wonderful place. And I'm going to do my best here to do a old Irish Tipperary inspired, I think that's the region he's from, somewhere around there, an accent. So bear with me. If it's not very good, at least it'll be entertaining to watch me flounder. And he was giving this sermon, and he said, priests of the church, priests of Jesus Christ, our job is to bring the faithful in touch with reality. We come to church to encounter reality. Okay, I'll stop the impression, I promise. And the context of his sermon, he was talking about how he told us, he basically gave us a thought experiment. He said, there are 10 million people in London, England, something like that. And he said, if you asked all those millions of people if they wanted to attend the coronation of King Charles III, he says over 95% would say yes in a heartbeat, even if they didn't like the king. Because why wouldn't they want to go? Who would want to go to that? I mean, it's an experience. It's an event. It's a coronation. It's pomp and circumstance and music and ritual and ceremony and history. Who would not want to go to that? Even if you don't like the monarchy, you'd be like, if someone give you a ticket to go and see that, you say, sure, why not? Why wouldn't I want to be there? And he said, but if I invited the same people, the 10 million people in London, England, if they wanted to come to Mass on Sunday, he says, I bet you over 90% would say no. And he said, this is the problem, is that people are not in touch with reality. It was a very profound statement because this is something that is part of basic Catholic and basically just classical metaphysics about reality. We have these realms of reality. We have the eviternal, we have the eternal, and we have our physical or corporeal reality. What does that mean? The eviternal is where God resides. Eviternal means with no beginning and no end. We usually use the term, I mixed that up. Eternal, eviternal, and the physical and corporeal. I'm not going to edit that out, so if I made a mistake, please wait 2 seconds until you hear the response to my own mistake. The eternal, eviternal, and the corporeal, physical. The eternal is no beginning, no end. That's God. The eviternal is beginning with no end. This is the angelic realm. So it's time, but no space. The eternal is no time and no space. And the realm that we inhabit, we kind of inhabit two realms as human beings because we have these immortal souls, but we have these mortal bodies. We have the beginning and the end of our physical nature, and we have the beginning and no end of our spiritual nature. C.S. Lewis talks about us as being amphibians in his Screwtape Letters, meaning we're kind of like a frog in the sense that we're a water creature, but we're also a land creature. We kind of live between two realms. This is what makes us so unique. In the beginning of creation, all of these realms were in harmony with one another. The eternal, the ev-eternal, and the corporeal or physical realm that we inhabit, all in harmony with one another. And then there's this existential break through sin, with the angels first and then with Adam and Eve. And from there has been this discord, essentially, from the lower rungs, the lower realms to the higher realm. Of course, none of this is on behalf of God, but it's because of us. And then Jesus Christ, he fixes this problem, or he offers the solution to this problem. The eternal inserts himself into the ev-eternal and the corporeal or physical by taking on the nature of a human being. And he gives us an eternal solution to a problem caused by non-eternal beings, which had eternal consequences. That is reality. The realm that God exists in is unchanging. It's more real than this video. It's more real because it exists in itself. God is he is existence itself. He exists in himself and of himself, with no external realities that cause or sustain his existence. Divine things are permanent. They have no beginning and they have no end. They have no degradation. They have no corruption. We have that because of sin. And the way that we withstand and get through the crisis in the church is we hold fast to eternity that has been given to us. And the devil likes to give us a lot of distractions to tempt us to avoid the higher calling that we're all called towards. And he gives us these distractions, or he tempts us to concern ourselves overly, one might say, with some of these distractions. And those can be distractions in politics, the politics in the church, economy stuff, pop culture, your neighbor's barking dog, whatever it is, things that give us distress, but a distress that is merely temporal and not eternal. And from there, we put our attention on the things that burn up and become dust, the things that decay and the things that go away. And we don't occupy our minds and our souls with the eternal things that bring us out of this valley of tears and this realm of difficulty and corruption and decay into perfect harmony with the reality, with a capital R, who breathed our soul and saved our souls from our own sin. All of these crises that we face, whether it's the Freemasons or it's the conspiracy of the elder brethren, or if it's the communists, or if it's the stupid politicians, if it's the occultists, if it's the Great Reset, or whatever, all of these things will be burnt up in an instant when their time is called. None of them are eternal. None of them can change your birthright, your baptismal right, which is to save your soul. All of them are just distractions, and they only have power over us if we pay attention to them. Yes, it is important to be informed to a degree, relatively, but it's not as important as we think it is, I don't think. You know, the Freemasons have been the enemy of the church for like 200 years. And they were, and they still are. And really, the Freemasons are just an extension of the naturalism of rabbinical Judaism that chose Barabbas over the Son of God. It's the same temptations that the devil gave Christ. You know, you can have the world, you can have the flesh, you can have power if you choose me, if you just bow to me. It's the same temptations that tempted David to do what he did with Bathsheba. It's the same temptations that Adam and Eve faced. You know, atheists, they like to poke at Christians. Well, atheists like to poke at Christians for a lot of reasons, but they like to poke at Christians because of that first part of the Bible where God says, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And atheists will say, aha, your God wants you to be dumb. He doesn't want you to know what's right and wrong. Well, some atheists are smart, but their atheism makes them dumber than they ought to be. The reality is that the temptation that the serpent gives to Adam and Eve is not to know things we should know. It's to exalt them above their station in life, as if they have the right to know intimately things that are good and evil through experience. You can't really know sin to the degree that the devil wants you to know sin unless you commit it. In the sense that to have an intimate knowledge of the sin is to be in it. God is saying, don't decide for yourself what is right and wrong, because how could you know that? I made you and the law is mine. It's not an act of pride for God to say that. It's an act of fathering, of paternal care for children, to say, trust me, you don't want to drink what's under the sink. You don't have to go drink what's under the sink to know why you shouldn't drink what's under the sink. Atheists want you to believe that God is a tyrant when really God is just a father trying to have you not poison yourself. These temptations are always the same. And it's very important that the devil says that they should eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because there is this temptation amongst people to have this type of special knowledge, to know things for intellectual curiosity. And as the expression goes, it is curiosity that killed the cat. Plenty of Catholics and many traditional Catholics, not only, but many, they really want to know what's behind every rock. How deep does the conspiracy go? How many members of the Curia have been Freemasons? How many times did so-and-so visit B'nai B'rith? Just how many millions of dollars did Klaus Schwab promise so-and-so, the head of state, to enact, medical experimentation programs in the country? And so on and so forth. But it's a never-ending and fleeting desire that can never be satiated, because the desire that you have for this knowledge is not for the knowledge of things that will pass away. The desire that you have for knowledge in the true sense is to know God who never passes away. This is why Christ says, for my word will never pass away. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word will never pass away. That is what we're supposed to know. So again, we can prudentially consider certain things. We've got to raise our children. We've got to decide where they should go to school. We've got to figure out if we have to leave or move, or we've got to provide. And we have to know things to a degree. And especially husbands and fathers need to know those things more than wives. But we also have to have a limit. We have to spend less time going down the rabbit holes of conspiracies and plans to overthrow the world and secret societies and so forth, because there's a temptation in that to externalize our own sin. The world is falling apart because of the Masons. The world is falling apart because the church is falling apart because Pope Francis said something stupid in an interview. What else is new? I heard the sun rose this morning as well. Some things just happen pretty often. But the world is falling apart because we sin. The church is falling apart because we sin. It's the same thing as the Old Testament. The hierarchy of the temple would fall into sin. The people would fall into idolatry. They'd lust after power and dominance, and they would be corrupted by their fornication with the things of the world and the strange gods and whatever. And a prophet would come and he would say, return to God and eschew your evil ways and cast those aside and go back to the things that God has taught you. And usually they killed him because people really want to hold on to their sin. And I know that some people are probably thinking, and I'll probably see the comments, how can you say this, Kennedy? Don't you know about the Great Reset? Don't you know about the goals of Klaus Schwab? Don't you know about the secret meeting between the blah, blah, blah and the blah, blah, blah? This is the most important thing. These things are distractions. These things are going to cause you despair in your soul. You know, if you've got a job, let's say, where you can spend all day listening to podcasts, and a lot of jobs, people do that nowadays. I've never been the kind of person who can work while listening to something. I can listen to classical music, but I can't even listen to music with lyrics. You know, if I'm writing a book, I want either silence or like I want to have no noise that I pay attention to. It can be in a crowded cafe or something and it's just whatever white noise. It can be light piano or classical music that I sort of tune out and it's just there as a background. Or I want complete silence. When I was in university, this was long before, this is, 2007 to 2013 or whatever it was. I used to go into the library and I had my headphones and I put them on and I found a website where it was like, white noise something. And I would just go to that website and listen to white noise while I studied. That's the way I like to study and write and things like that. But there are a lot of people who are able to, do their desk job or their factory job or their manufacturing job or their driving job or construction or farming or whatever their job is, where they basically have an earphone in and they're listening to podcasts all day long, long drives. And it's very tempting, isn't it, to listen to the latest politics one or whatever. And there's power and knowledge, but there's also despair and hope and a lack of hope and knowledge, isn't there? And there's no peace of soul in knowing every jot and tittle of what's happening in the election. None of that's going to help you sleep at night. And before you know it, it's going to be too late. All of those hours, all of those years combined of time put together, of time spent scrolling on the internet and listening to podcasts and about, the affairs of the world and so forth. One day you're going to be old. Maybe you already are. If you are, you're probably smarter than me. And you're going to realize all of that time worrying about the election, all of that time worrying about who the true pope was, all of that time worrying about whatever the Pope said on an airplane interview or whatever. None of those things are going to save your soul. None of those things are going to give you consolation. And the momentary pleasure that those things gave you by this little hit of dopamine with some factoid or something to get upset about, you can't even remember what that felt like, can you? It's just gone. And all that's left is you and your soul. And one day, you're going to present yourself to our Lord Jesus Christ, and your soul's either going to be ready to go in, or you're going to be sent somewhere else, either to be purified, or you're not going to make it at all. That is what is most important. The way that you stay sane during the crisis in the church is by, quite frankly, not focusing on the crisis in the church. Especially if it's not your station in life. It's funny. I've been attending the SSPX for about 6 years now, I guess. I've been to many different chapels around the world. I've had more experience than a lot of people just based on what I do for a living, and corresponded with many priests. And I've been to many different places for Mass and probably heard dozens of SSPX priests preach and say Mass and do conferences and whatever. Read a ton of works by Archbishop Lefebvre and all this sort of thing. In all the hundreds and hundreds of Masses that I've attended, I think I've heard priests of the Society of St. Pius X preach about something Pope Francis did like less than 5 times. And a couple times it was even positive. It was some sort of Petrine feast day. And our priest wanted to sort of talk about the papacy and say, hey, Pope Francis said something good, and we should pray for the Pope to say more things that are good. It was kind of like that context. It wasn't even really negative. When Pope Francis put out that document about the homosexual blessings, the society released a statement and then they read it from the pulpit, but it was really just in response to something that was troubling people, but it wasn't, there wasn't too much focus. whenever I go to Mass and I hear one of these traditional priests preach, it's not about private revelations, which could be good, but they can also take your peace because you're always worried about the next apocalypse. It's not about the Great Reset or whatever. It's about how to save your soul. It's about charity. It's about what the scriptures mean. It's about how to catechize your children. It's about how to grow in holiness and virtue. And that's really all that matters, isn't it? You know, the crisis in the church will go away one day. I don't know when, but it will go away one day. And the only way that's going to happen is if the people of the church, the people of God, as Vatican II loves to talk about us, are purified. You know, God allows these crises and these persecutions to take place and to last for a reason. He allowed the Israelites to be exiled from the Holy Land and be under the dominion of Satanists, essentially, and idol worshippers. Why? Why did he allow that for so many years? Because they had to be purified of their sin. So whatever the reason is, we have to be purified of our sin, whatever our sins are. And God is allowing this because we probably took the faith for granted. I mean, look at what happened in the various communities and the jurisdictions in the world that were extremely Catholic, Ireland and Quebec and basically all of Western Europe and Latin America and whatever. They all lost their faith almost overnight. It's actually quite remarkable. I mean, how did that happen? Yes, Vatican II and the new Mass, for sure. But why did Vatican II and the new Mass happen? Because all those priests that did that craziness were from those places. Well, because there was already a weak faith. There was already a worldliness. And I think a lot of it probably had to do with the wars. I mean, there's lots of reasons, but I think a lot of the death and destruction of the two insane wars and the communist revolution and so forth, I think it really shook people, and that's understandable. But I think the result of that was, you know, the response to what happened in the two world wars by the bishops of the church and the priests of the church and the faithful worldwide should have been, and I'm sure this happened in some jurisdictions, but generally speaking, it should have been, this is a chastisement from God. We must become holier and we must do penance. But the response ultimately, when you look at the writings, a lot of those conciliar fathers was basically about needing to avoid, you know, divisions and things like that and search for world peace, which was really not the solution, was it? Because look at us now. The solution is always to return to God and to do more penance and worship God better and pray better and all those things. And we just didn't do that. So God allowed that to happen to us because of our stupidity. And now we're being purified. And the crisis will end when it does. But it doesn't matter how many podcasts we listen to. It doesn't matter how many great reset conspiracies or synagogue things or Freemason things. It doesn't matter. Those things can help here and there. But concerning ourselves with them, I mean, and I'm guilty of this too. You know, last night, my wife was gone with the kids all day, and I wasn't sure what time they'd be home for supper time and bedtime and whatever. So I said, okay, just pray the rosary with them in the car while you're gone for the day, and I'll pray the rosary myself. And I had planned to pray it in the evening, and I did. But I remember at a certain point, I had kind of waited till the last minute, and I was so distracted thinking about other things or going on Twitter or something stupid, you know, something totally stupid and a waste of time. And I stopped and I thought to myself, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time. I mean, this doesn't matter what I'm doing. And I prayed the rosary. And I immediately felt 1,000 times better. All of us have those problems. And until we realize that all of these distractions and temptations are just from Satan to take us away from the eternity that God has destined us to, the church is not going to get better, no matter how many things we learn. And I'll end by saying this, of course. If you're just joining at this moment, maybe you're confused why I'm saying this, but I'm not saying don't be informed at all. I'm just saying there's got to be a limit, and it's got to be sectioned off, and you've got to, and at a certain point, enough has to be enough. You know, how many times do you have to hear about the same Vatican Bank scandal before you understand that there's been a Vatican Bank scandal? And what does it matter to listen to another show on it another time? How many articles you have to read about Justin Trudeau being an idiot to know that he's an idiot? And how often have you prayed for him, knowing how perilous his situation is and how damned he will be unless he repents? He's a baptized Catholic. Same can be said for Joe Biden and many other world leaders. All right, my moralizing and my advice is over. And I will just end by saying, pray the rosary. Taylor Marshall loves to say, pray the rosary every day. Pray the rosary every day. And if you already pray the rosary every day, try to pray the rosary more each day. Maybe start off with 2 extra decades. Not at the same time, but you walk your dog, pray 2 extra decades. Pray the family rosary at night. You've prayed 7 decades. Eventually add an 8th. Eventually add a 9th, a 10th. Before you know it, maybe you pray the whole gamut, the whole slew of mysteries each day. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That's really the only way to get through this, isn't it? All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Mere Tradition. Until next time, God bless you all.